Fear-based denial of the problem must first be dealt with and conquered and stamped out. And you have to acknowledge how bad it is. You know? People feel symptoms coming on of a disease or something and they want to ignore it because they don't want to believe I'm sick. The second step to problem solving is to recognize that the symptoms that are being displayed, the symptoms you are seeing, are merely effects of underlying causal factors. You can't treat symptoms and solve a problem. It's not possible. That's not how problem solving works. You have to get to what caused the problem. You're going to then put that knowledge into action. Understanding what created the problem is like step 2, right? Stop being in denial. Understand what caused the problem. Act on the knowledge you now have to solve the problem, to make it right.
It's a reflection of these 3 parts. It's a reflection of the 3 components of consciousness: thought, emotion, and action. Thought, governed in the higher order thinking of the human brain. Emotions, largely governed in the limbic system, the mammal brain, the mammalian brain. And then action, movement, survival instinct, governed by the R complex. All necessary components to function and to express consciousness. None of them should be, the 2 lower parts of the brain should not be chronically dominant. So let's explain how they become chronically dominant. They're there to perform a vital function, but they're not to rule the house. The house needs to be ruled by the human brain in a state of balance, the higher brain, the neocortical brain. When the left brain is chronically dominant, the person becomes somebody who thinks that they're a master of other people. I call this master think. When the right brain is chronically imbalanced, you end up with a population that won't stand up for their rights. They don't have enough self-respect. They don't care about themselves enough to say, no, this is wrong. It's not going to continue, even if it comes to the point where I have to use physical force to stop this. And that's called a willing slave, ladies and gentlemen. Somebody who will not stand up for their rights is a willing slave. I don't care why you're doing it. Whether, just because you're a coward and you can't develop conscience, you're ruled by the emotional part of the brain, and you don't have any true self-respect to stand up for yourself and say no. And that's what the New Age movement is all about, making more people like that. That's why they want to propagate it as the New World religion, because they want people in this slave think mindset to accept slavery. However, the ideology of Satanism has nothing to do with the worship of the Christian devil, the concept of the Christian devil. It is about pure selfishness being the highest aspiration in life. If I could encapsulate what satanic ideology is in a nutshell, it's waking up in the morning, and from the minute you wake up until the time you go to sleep that night, you aren't thinking about anything but yourself and what you could do to improve your own situation, and you never ever think about anybody else's situation. You never have any compassion for the suffering of other people in the world. You don't look at the world in a wider sense. You don't look at the injustices that are going on in the world in any kind of a wider sense. All you are doing is focused on me, all day, every day.
But people say, hey, why do we need to look at symbolism and interpret them and try to understand what symbols mean? Isn't that a big waste of time? You hear this again. The people who say this is all insignificant, again, over and over again, these people are the people who think it's just a political problem. All right? We just have to analyze what's going on in politics, find the right people for the position, the world's going to be fine. It's just we need some reform in government, that's all. And it's not slavery, We just need to reform that financial system. If we just get control over coining the money again, it's going to be hunky-dory, These are the people who would mock and ridicule the study of symbolism entirely. Semiotics, They would say, you don't need to look into symbolism or break it down or try to understand what it means. It's all meaningless. Consider with great care where their information comes from, the source for the information. And this is because by refusing to present certain information and by influencing people to dissuade them from looking into certain information because they're telling you that it's unimportant or unnecessary to consider, many modern institutions like media, like so-called education institutions, are seeking to actually control human perceptions, or let's call it outright what it really is, to control the mind. Okay? And therefore, to limit what human beings may even come to understand, and therefore by limiting what they are coming to understand, they're actually limiting what they're able to do, what they're able to change, what they're able to create in the world.
You should feel anger when there's injustice. Okay? Just like Howard Beale here in the movie Network. You know, I'm mad as hell, I'm not going to take this anymore. I'm going to do something to create change. Like the saying goes, if you're not outraged, you're not paying attention. And even in the biblical allegory of Christ, people give me a hard time about putting Jesus in the presentation. He's going to be in here a few times too. Okay? I understand the astrotheological allegory of the Christ figure. I get that. I could write a book on it if I wanted to. I understand that there's a possibility Jesus was not a physical historical personage. I get emails about this all the time when I talk about the message of the Christ. Okay? It's a whole different thing than the religion about Christ. But in the allegory, Jesus gets angry. He takes out the switch and whips the money changers' asses. Okay? He's feeling and owning his anger and channeling it in the world and taking the switch out if it has.
And they've been constructed that way. They've been built. They think their thoughts are their own. They think the way they are is their choice. It's a joke. You're a joke. A joke that you even believe that crap. That you made those choices. Those choices were made for you, little boys. You think the way social engineers and dark occultists wanted you to think. According to their plan, according to their specifications, and they built you to spec. You don't even know your thoughts aren't your own. You don't even know your behaviors aren't your own. You're running a program. You're running a program that was written by people you never met and never will meet.
Here's a very simple diagram. Again, if people understand it, they really get how natural law functions. And again, it's very unpopular. People don't want to look at what the bottom base foundation or platform of this structure is. Available information is what you're starting with. This constitutes potential knowledge, and it can become knowledge if it's taken in, if it's amassed, if it's aggregated, okay? It can be gathered, it can be processed, it can be understood, and then it can be acted upon. You could call this the grammar stage of this three-part process I'm going to explain. Okay? You could also refer to this as the input stage. If we're looking at it in a computer model, this is the stage of inputting information or programming something. Okay? That we're going to build on top of that. The third process, all right, is the behavior or the output, as we've already talked about in the human nature section. The output onto the screen of life then occurs because each individual's behavior is, by definition, going to be based upon the quality of their decision-making processes in step 2, which were in turn based upon the quality of their available information in step 1. That's why if you want to control the output, you always control it from available information. Hence, hiding knowledge, the occult, okay? That's where the powers that should not be control the world from the level of available information. So, what then occurs? What happens? These are the 3 steps we work with. Knowledge, understanding, and wisdom, or lack thereof. So, based upon these 3 processes, something is generated. Something is created in the physical manifestation, physically manifested reality, the real world, so to speak. So, the manifested reality is based upon the aggregate behavior. Aggregate behavior. No one person is creating the reality we are experiencing. Okay? It's another fallacy of the New Age movement and thinking. In the aggregate, we are creating our shared reality. All the behaviors put together creates the output on the screen, or the generated result. Is it orderly? Is it chaotic? Well, that's going to be based upon whether someone took in the information, processed it efficiently to come to an understanding, and then acted upon it.
Again, a little bit of knowledge is a dangerous thing. Drink deeply or taste not the Pierian spring. There, shallow draughts intoxicate the brain, and drinking deeply sobers us again. See, this is an allegory about people who think they have it all figured out when they haven't really done their homework. They haven't really understood what the power structure is about. They haven't really understood what this ideology that's keeping people under their control is all about and its main tenets. I highly encourage people to read the Satanic Bible, not because I want you to put into practice anything that's talked about in the book, but because I want you to understand the mindset of the dark occult. And people don't understand what Satanism is at all. All of the images that it conveys when you say Satanism to people have almost zero to do with what Satanism really is. And people have to understand, in an organization like the Church of Satan and in the dark occult in general, every single aspect of culture is represented. You have people of every persuasion in every institution. You have people of every nationality. You have people in every country participating in this ideology, because that's what it is. It's an ideology. We're looking for, quote, groups of people to blame this or that on. The thing that's holding all of this control system together is an ideology.
So Samuel Adams said, "The truth is, all might be free if they valued freedom and defended it as they ought." Freedom has to be valued and defended. And that is why we're in the situation that we are in as a people, because truth isn't valued and defended enough. It's not only a right, it's a duty and a responsibility that you can never shirk. Actually, in nature, you can only make the claim that you're going to shirk it, but you can't really do that. He said, the right of freedom being the gift of God Almighty, it is not in the power of man to alienate this gift and voluntarily become a slave. That's why they don't want people reading the Founding Fathers' writings. They might get some crazy ideas that they're free and not owned by others.
And what both of these traditions really are all about is understanding the self better. I posted some videos on the podcast for Kabbalah, and last week I posted some additional ones about tarot, and they both attempt to explain that these traditions ultimately are about knowing oneself better. They're about understanding the forces that are at work within the human psyche. And the symbolism is all really geared toward that goal, to help one go within, to help one understand that which is at work within oneself. The better we know ourselves, the more we are in tune with really the forces of nature, and the less we are able to be manipulated externally.
What is the Matrix? The film begins in a hotel called the Heart of the City. So it's starting at the heart. This is very highly symbolic, as we will see, because people, one of the things people miss in this movie is that it begins and ends in the same place, in the heart. Okay? It actually comes around full circle, and Neo actually ends up in this building at the end of the film. Okay? So every movie, every one of the movies also begins with Trinity, the main female lead, played by Carrie-Anne Moss, in distress, in severe distress of some kind. Each movie starts with her under attack or in distress, okay? Because she represents the feminine force that is in distress in our world, okay? She's under attack by agents at the beginning of the first film. In this scene, we see that Smith has a new ability in this film to replicate himself. Agents are now replicating and they're everywhere. Okay? So he puts his hand into the heart and turns it black. Okay? Highly symbolic. He's destroying people's care. He's eating their heart. And then he turns him into one of them, an agent for the system of control. Okay? So he takes over one of the people who is one of the crew members on another ship, Bane. His name is. Now, Bane is symbolic. Bane means poison in Latin. Okay? So that's how we are poisoned. We become poisoned through the heart. Actually, if you really want to get technical, what Bane means in Latin is not just poison. It means an agent of death. The architect then says to Neo, the function of the one is only to return to the source, after which he's required to select from the matrix 23 individuals. That's a highly symbolic number, which represents escape. Getting out is what the number 23 represents in occult terms. In other words, he got out of the matrix, but he's going to reload it. That's where the name comes from. You're just starting the same system of control all over again. Because most people, when they come out of one system of control, what do? They build up another one. It isn't about laying down the sword. It's, let's make a new system of control. And we'll be the new kings. We'll be the new rulers in this one. And we'll just do it all over again. It's not, what he's trying to say is, you're going to, we'll get you to a point of revolution, and then you'll just reload the matrix by bringing in another form of government. And the architect says, she stumbled upon a solution whereby 99% of all the test subjects accepted the program. And what was this solution? The illusion of choice. The Hegelian dialectic. Do you want the Republicans or do you want the Democrats? And that illusion of free choice is what gets people, even though it's a false choice, it's a false paradigm, gets people to accept the program of the matrix. And what the choice ultimately is, do you want this form of control or do you want this form of control? But either way, you're under control. Because it's controlled by the same mind who doesn't give a damn about it. And that's the false choice that people are presenting. Hegelian dialectic is what this is called. The presentation of a false choice to give the person who you're controlling the illusion that they've made the choice for themselves. And this is all an illusion. Just like politics, it's all an illusion. It's all fake. It's all... Right? He says, you see, there's really only one constant. There's only one universal. There's one universal law, ultimately. There's only one ultimate truth. The only real truth. Causality. Action, reaction. Cause and effect. Morpheus replies to that saying, everything begins with choice. And the Merovingian replies, wrong. Choice is an illusion created between those with power and those without. That is the nature of the universe. Causality. There is no escape from it. Our only hope, our only peace is to understand it. To understand the why. It is all about the why of things. Okay? The Oracle says to Neo, we can never see past the choices that we do not understand. You didn't come here to make the choice. You've already made it. You're here to try to understand why you made it. In other words, she's telling him, you have to get to the why of your decisions. You have to understand the primary motivating factors of behavior. If you can't do that, you're done. He says, what if I can't do that? What happens if I fail? And she says, then Zion will fall, meaning humanity will be doomed. We can't understand what drives our behavior, our primary drives and motivations, the causal factors that lead us to make the choices that we do. We're doomed as a species. Very, very powerful, a crux of the philosophy in this movie. Okay? And Agent Smith says to Morpheus, in reference to the matrix itself, the system of control, have you ever stared at it and marveled at its beauty, its genius? Billions and billions of people just living out their lives completely oblivious. Talking about the control system we're living in. He says, did you know that the first matrix was designed to be a perfect human world? Where none suffered, where everyone would be happy. It was a complete disaster. No one would accept the program. And that's because as a species, human beings define their reality through misery and suffering. This is Smith's dark, poisoned worldview of humanity, of how he sees humanity. And this is part of our poisoned worldview. Why we're still stuck in the matrix is this is a lot of people's poisoned worldview. Natural resources consumed. The only way you survive is to spread to another area. There is another organism on this planet that follows this same pattern. Do you know what it is? A virus. Human beings are a disease, a cancer of this planet. You are a plague and we are the cure, meaning the machines. Because he's one of the programs in the machine world. So that's his worldview. And that is the dominator's worldview. That is really what they think. That's how they think. And unfortunately, they have infected our minds with that worldview, and many of us think that same way. We're not a virus. If we continue to think that we are, we're falling right into their game, into their hands, and believing in their worldview, which is ultimately going to lead us right into their continued control. So he's trying to break Morpheus' spirit. He's trying to break his mind. And the agents can be anybody within the system, because the system is what people are attached to. Okay? So they're not willing to follow the truth. They're not willing to do the right thing. They're going to do whatever the system commands them to do. So anybody's a potential agent of the control system. Morpheus says the matrix is a system. That system is our enemy. When you're inside, what do you see? Businessmen, teachers, lawyers, carpenters. The very minds of the people we're trying to save. They are so hopelessly dependent on the system that they will fight to protect it. They will fight to protect their enslavers. They don't want to be free because they've never even understood what the concept of freedom is, let alone practiced it or lived it in their lives. They love being under control. They love being dominated. They love being enslaved. And they want it to stay that way, because it staying that way means ultimately they have no true personal responsibility, the thing that they're really trying to duck more than anything else. So Morpheus says that the AI that took over the world was a singular consciousness that spawned a race, an entire race of machines. He refers to it as a consciousness. Again, it's machine consciousness. It is intellect with it completely divorced from any wisdom. It is intellect completely divorced from any true care or heart or compassion. That's the machine world. The world of I don't care as long as I get mine. That's the matrix that we're living in. That's the consciousness that fuels that system of control. He answers the question. There it is. What is the matrix? Control. The matrix is a dream world built to keep us under control, in order to change a human being into this. And he holds up a battery, because we are their fuel through our consent.
Okay? And I call it what it really is. You want to use the scientific and the politically correct term or whatever? It's called social engineering. All right? But what I call it is what it really is: mind control. And that's what most people are under. They're under mind control. Okay? Social engineering is used to keep us ignorant and afraid. The socialist, communist, outcome-based education system that we have in place in this country is keeping people in a state of ignorance regarding inherent rights through indoctrination into postmodernism. This is what is being taught in universities all over this country, all over the world. Postmodern thought, which is all about think with your feelings, everything is relative, okay? And you could just believe whatever you want, and that'll basically make it so, and everybody's belief independently is just as valid as everybody else's belief. No, it's not. There's such a thing called truth. And then there's such a thing called aligning perception to truth, which is what our job as human beings should be to do. Rabid statists, rabid leftists, rabid communists. And let me tell you what another thing there is in that scene.
nihilists. Nihilism is just rampant in the heavy music scene in general, of any kind of extreme or heavy music. Just people who say, humanity's fucked, don't care about anything. We feel sorry for the people who do care about anything, they'll say. I'm like, you don't understand. I don't care creates a prison for all of us. That's the exact dynamic that's going to put you in a prison.
Jesus opposed and exposed. The three worldly dynamics that Jesus actually fought against during his lifetime, as described in the New Testament, were what I call the unholy trinity: religion, money, and government. He challenged the established religious orders of his day, the Pharisees and the Sadducees. He took great issue with the usury of the temple money changers, who were the established financial order of his day. And of course, he was convicted and crucified by the Roman government at the behest of the religious and monetary powers. This example, which fake Christians never talk about, also serves to illustrate where the true power of the control system ultimately lies. Who ultimately petitioned the government to crucify Jesus? The religious orders. And they were working at the behest of the monetary system as well, in collusion with the monetary system, I should say.
Of dark occultists who are using this hidden knowledge about the human psyche and the laws of nature to their advantage at everyone else's expense. We have to look at them not as magicians as we would see in Hollywood. That's not the kind of sorcery or magic that I'm talking about here. I'm talking about being able to influence people's minds, not just at an individual level, but they can influence entire societies' minds. These are social engineers of the highest order, and they do this by understanding everything that there is to understand about the deepest recesses of human psychology. Because there's such a knowledge differential, and the average person hasn't studied that for one split second in the course of their entire natural lives. This priest class are the chess masters who have won every major chess tournament in the world when it comes to the chess game of human psychology. And we're the novices. Humanity are the novices that don't even understand how the pieces move.
Dark occult priest class that is really at the helm of society, unfortunately. They have accomplished making people into low-level Satanists. Yeah. It has become a society that is, for all intents and purposes, behaving as Satanists, yet not really understanding that they are behaving as Satanists, nor understanding what the ideology of real Satanism is. Not Satanism from the traditional Christian perspective. I'm talking about ideological Satanism, which is essentially the dark occult ideology that is running the world. It is service to self above all others, and moral relativism are the first two basic tenets of this religion. And then in the darker aspects of it, it descends into social Darwinism and eugenics, which shockingly many people who are going to be the target of eugenics accept and believe is a valid ideology.
David Icke said, accept responsibility for yourself and your actions, thoughts, and words. You alone make choices. You alone are answerable to the consequences of your behavior. The feeble excuse that the establishment expected it holds no truth or justification. What is the point of having principles if you allow others to dictate your behavior? At the end of the day, you will judge your performance and the contribution you have made to creation. It will not be based on what another expected of you or what you did because you felt trapped. And how often do we hear that? I had no choice. It's something I had to do. I didn't have anywhere else to go.
The armchair quarterbacking is going to do nothing to change our situation, folks. Get involved. Get on the field. These armchair quarterbacks and people who think everybody's a shill because they said one thing they don't agree with. Oh, he said he didn't talk about this aspect of this, and so he must be a shill and trying to hold that back. Well, it doesn't occur to somebody. Maybe he didn't want to focus on that aspect, or maybe he doesn't even know about that aspect. You would see what the level of evil and sickness that you're really up against, and you wouldn't waste one iota of energy nitpicking on the people who are actually trying to change this thing. And again, it isn't to necessarily just to go on an attack or a rant. It's to point this out, that this is a bad use of energy. It's not, I don't recommend it as a good use of people's energy. Go do something that's truly productive. Put this information out there for other people.
What we care enough about to put our will behind and act upon is what gets created in our world. The world is the way that it is, unfortunately, because most people do not care enough, even if they say they want things to be different, to change the world through their actions. That's the sad truth about the human condition. And until the heart is expanded and we care enough to get on the battlefield and take right action in the world and teach the difference between right and wrong, not only to ourselves and to others around us, our children, future generations, okay? Those who come after us, don't expect any real positive lasting change. It doesn't just magically manifest on its own. It takes the ordering principle of willpower driven by true care. That's what it's going to take to get this work done. I can barely do those things for me. I don't want to do those things for me sometimes, to be quite honest. Okay? But I do. And I'm here to tell you, you have to be your own leader. You have to be responsible for yourself. You have to set your own goals. You have to learn the truth yourself. And then you need to communicate that truth to other people. A real master creates other masters, not followers. They set other people, they say, here's the path to mastery. You want to be a master? Go down that path. That's all a master does. After he's been down it, I can tell you what's at the other end. I went down it. You want to be a master? Go down that path, you'll be a master. Then you'll be ready to teach other people. Period. And I'm not saying knowing what it takes to know the truth and be awakened makes me a super better individual than anybody else. I struggle with doing the right thing just like other people will. Okay? Every day. The whole point is, I'm trying.
The major arcana. The arcana is the word for knowledge. Okay? It is a Latin word. It means knowledge. This means the major knowledge. The Hermetic principle of that which is above is like to that which is below. Meaning that the universe is self-similar across all scales. Okay? That which happens in the microcosmic world, or the small, okay, is reflected into the macrocosmic world, or the very large. So that which is taking place at a individual level is reflected outward into society, and that's what our society becomes like, depending on how many people embody that particular modality of consciousness. The cups suit represents our emotional qualities. Okay, so while wands represents the plane of will or action, okay, cups represents the emotional plane, okay, or what is taking place within us, the spirit in which we do things, the spirit in which we take our actions. So swords represents our intellectual capacities and capabilities. Swords is intellect. Okay? And while that's important, what we know, we have to care enough to do something with what we know, and then we have to actually develop the will to act. That's why swords comes even below wands and cups. Okay?
The teachings found in the words of Jesus regarding how to behave toward others are what is truly important, not his historical authenticity. People get too tied up in this, you know? And then it causes just infighting, and nobody's actually talking about the philosophy, which is what's important. They get hung up on the little details. And I consider this a little detail because ultimately it's the ideas that are transformative, not the man. Again, that's why I tell you, it doesn't matter whether you like me, care about me, want to know anything there is to know about me. I'm completely unconcerned whether you even know the name Mark Passio. All I want you to know is the information that I happen to understand, because I believe that it can, I don't believe, I know that it is capable of transforming the world for the better if everybody takes it into themselves and then acts upon it. Now just think about this for a minute. Okay, out of all the things I could possibly tell people, this is what it means to be awake. This is what I consider number one and most important. Knowledge of the occult. And understanding that there are both light aspects to occultism and dark aspects to occultism. That it is a dual-edged sword, and the knowledge is just a tool. It could be used to uplift consciousness, or it could be used to control and enslave. And, like the gentleman who asked the question earlier in the earlier session today, okay, these people are ancient psychologists. Well, what do we need to do to break through and understand the psychology they're using against us? We have to become psychologists. The same thing applies. If we are dealing with dark occultists who are using knowledge of the human psyche to control and enslave, we have to become occultists and use it for the light. This philosophy predates Christianity by thousands of years and can be traced back to ancient solar hero myths, which represented alignment with natural law. Knowledge, the sun. We'll get to that symbolism later. The Christ figure of the New Testament scripture is an extension and or representation of this sun hero tradition, who embodies the fullness of natural law itself. That's what this allegorical figure is ultimately all about. He is the embodiment of living a life in accordance with natural law. That's a good role model to have. Called the Bohemian Grove, and the ritual is known as the cremation of care. And they are literally immolating care. They call it dull care. They want to destroy the empathy that a normal human being would experience in doing the evil work that they do. And thus the ritual is the burning away of one's conscience. That is what it ritualistically symbolizes. The immolation of conscience. Now these occultists, will say, will put their media on this and say, there's nothing to see here. Nothing whatsoever to see there. It's just the world's power brokers all gathering in the same place. Media moguls, entertainment figures, heads of worldwide multinational corporations, all gathered, all planning and plotting.
And it's a great term for it, because it describes it perfectly. You create the problem to get a reaction, and then you offer the solution. And the solution was already predetermined. But I like to call it chaos, confusion, opportunity, because I think it more accurately describes what the process that's taking place is really about. You want to create chaos. You need a chaotic situation created, because the reaction that you're looking for is confusion, not knowing what to do or how to act appropriately to the situation. Once confusion enters the mix, you have fear-based consciousness. So the person is willing to accept all kinds of limitations and control to go back to order. And therefore, that's your opportunity to bring in your predetermined solution and get them to go along. Methods of manipulation, and the last one is the biggest of them all, chaos sorcery. What has been known as the Hegelian dialectic, or problem, reaction, solution. And we're going to talk about what the Hegelian dialectic is, and we're going to see an example of how this is put into action when we analyze the 9/11 occult ritual. The Hegelian dialectic is what chaos sorcery really is, and this is an ideology that was formulated by George Hegel, a German philosopher. The Hegelian dialectic is a framework for guiding
our thoughts and actions into conflicts that lead to a predetermined solution. So the solution is already predetermined before anything happens. The people who are putting this into effect want a certain outcome. This was the major crisis that they introduced. The events of 9/11, 2001, was an example of the modified Hegelian dialectic. It was an example of chaos sorcery. It was an occultic ritual of human sacrifice that involved three major examples of occultic symbology and ideology in the work to create the synthesis that they were looking for. And those three occult schools, Kabbalah, Tarot, and Freemasonry. Now, before we get into any confusion at all, I want to state emphatically that I do not believe that any of these systems are evil in and of themselves. It is how occult sciences are used, occult knowledge is used